It's a very special night because here at the table, we are going to do our second annual. So now it's like a thing, second annual Story Sunday. And basically the idea is that to kick off each year, we like to just start by reflecting a bit, on where we've been. And something I believe is that, all of us, we're not so much just human beings having the occasional spiritual experience, but that deep down in our cores, that we are really spiritual beings having a human experience. In other words, there's this inner journey, the journey of the heart, of the mind, of the soul, the process by which we are waking up to God, we're growing up into the image of Christ, and then that empowers us to show up in the world, being people of faith, hope, and love. So in so many ways, is it hitting my thing? I don't know. Does that work?
Go for it.
Okay.
That'll fix it.
Pretty stylish too. Sorry about my mic hitting that thing. So as I was saying, just that it's about this, this inner journey. And so basically what we want to do is kind of create this space for people to be able to share their story, really the story of where they've been, the challenges that they faced, and just what they're learning about, God, themselves, the world, and kind of the idea is that in the process of them sharing, that's not only helpful and insightful for them, it's also incredibly encouraging and enlightening for us, because we begin to see ourselves and those we love, in their stories. So with that in mind, we're going to have two very special people who will be sharing with us tonight. And the first is someone who, although you may not recognize her, she's been a faithful member at the table for a number of months now, and her name is Mariah Kent. So Mariah's, here she is. Hello, my friend. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you could be here. And so a few months back, Mariah and I, we grabbed coffee. That's been a good way for me to connect with folks, is some outdoor coffee slots. And so when we did that, Mariah, I was just so struck by your story. And so I've been really excited just to have others kind of be brought into the loop, to be able to hear it, and just to get to know you and to really glean some wisdom from some of the experiences that you've had. So how about you start off just by sharing with us, a little bit about yourself, where you're from, any family info, how you found the table, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, great. So as Brett mentioned, my name is Mariah. I am from Texas, so right here. I grew up in the colony. I have an amazing husband. His name is Cody, and a cute dog. His name is Finn, and he's snoring in the background, so I apologize if you hear him. And yeah, I found the table just by looking. I was looking for a church that fit my values, and that's where I found the table.
Cool. Well, we are glad that you found us. So so you've just in kind of sharing, I realized pretty quickly in your story that you've kind of had this whole journey out of a rather toxic kind of a church situation.
Right.
And I get, like, to some degree, like any human community, we all have our dysfunctions. I mean, every family, every church, every organization. But the experience you've had really of your former community, it's held, a lot of pain for you. So I wondered, could you just go ahead and share with us just some of the, the backstory? Like what was that context like? What was it like growing up there? Because it's really, extends back into like childhood for you.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a church family. My parents are both military. So I had a very strict upbringing just in general. But then on top of that, my mom found the church that I was raised in when I was 1 year old. So I was raised in that church almost from birth, from as long as I can remember. And there was a lot of great things, but there was also a lot of very controlling and strict things as well. Um, and so, from what I can remember, there was not a whole lot about the love of God and the mercy and grace of God, more of how God could smite you, if you did wrong by Him. And so, much like it was shared in worship, I grew up in a place where I was driven by fear instead of love and knowing the true power of God that I feel like I'm still learning now. So kind of practicals there is you have a church family, and it's a very large church family, and you go to church 3 times a week standard. But then there's also other church gatherings, usually about 5, I would say, a week, that you are basically required to go to. If you're not there, somebody is calling you and asking you if you're on your deathbed, because that's where you should be if you're not there. Your friends groups are in this church, you date within this church. And I just remember as a child feeling lonely. I wasn't able to go to sleepovers, and I didn't have prom and homecoming. So just things that I was not able to do because of the rules and the community.
It sounds like the kind of the ethos, the vibe, the culture of this church community was kind of one of a lot of control. And
Yes.
I wondered, were there like any other kind of red flags, experiences that you had that kind of tipped you off? Probably maybe as you got older, because of course, when you're like 6 years old or whatever, like you don't
Right.
tune into this is odd. So as you got older, what were there any other things, kind of red flags, experiences that
Yeah.
you had?
I think that even from a young age, I started to see things that I didn't particularly agree with. Namely, I felt like I wasn't allowed to be an individual or ask any questions.
Mm.
You were just kind of basically a soldier, right? You just follow and you do what you're told to do. And asking questions is bad, and you don't have your own individual life. It's really about everybody together, obeying God's commands and the Bible directly, and not necessarily your own individual experience. And so as I got older, I really wrestled with having an identity. I just felt like I wasn't allowed to be a person, and I was scared to have my own, likes and hobbies and friends, because everything was by the book and you had to do everything the way they told you to do it. So that was kind of a red flag for me. Another red flag for me growing up was homosexuality. It's always been something that I have strongly disagreed with a mainstream vision of that's not allowed. And I had questions. I didn't understand why there was no love when all I felt was love. For anybody that was different from me, anybody that was the same as me, and so I didn't understand that. I had a lot of questions, and those questions weren't allowed. So those were kind of red flags for me.
Yeah, yeah. Was there? I mean, obviously there were a lot of challenges, from that season in your life. I am wondering, looking back on it, are there kind of moments or places, experiences that you can kind of see like God's grace? In other words, was there good from that, that season? I don't know if it's things you learned about yourself or God or others, but I don't know. Is there anything you kind of glean as valuable from that season? Or was it just such a negative experience? It's like, bah, I'm just, no.
So yeah, in the moment, I feel like it was definitely negative, right? But looking back, I feel like I've learned tons from that experience in my life. I think for myself, I've learned how to be an individual. I have a voice now. I'm able to, have hobbies and friends that, we enjoy hanging out together, and we're not exactly alike, which I love. I love having friends with differences than me. It's probably one of my favorite things about leaving that community. I think what I've learned the most about God is that He is there. He's constantly there. Regardless if I left or not, He's always been with me. And that's been such a cool thing to learn, because even though I left and I tried to forget, He was still fighting behind the scenes and wrestling, for me. And I just felt, I feel so loved by that, because I didn't feel that, when I was a child. And I also learned about other people that, that there is differences between people. It's okay to have different ideas and different thoughts. And I think that, that's something that's been really big, is to learn to accept people's differences and love people, even though they may have different ideas and thoughts than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. What did it like? Was there kind of a breaking point, or what, what was it that eventually led you to kind of like, okay, I've got to move forward,
Right.
um, and then what did it look like for you to actually do that?
Yeah.
What were some of those experiences, the highs, the lows? What was that like? So kind of what led you to it, and then what was it like what did it look like as you did it?
Yeah. So I guess there was, the red flags were kind of leaders, to
Hmm.
me leaving. But as I got older, I knew that this isn't where I wanted to be. And it just became more apparent, when you become a member of that church. You're required to go through, different steps. One of those steps is to go through and describe every sin that you've ever committed, to a group of people, which sounds hard, just saying it out loud, but it's even harder when you're there. And so, because I was a teenager and I was a minor, and my parents were in the church, I not only had to share this information with the people that I was going through these steps with, but then also with my mom. And so, when I was going through, that step, I discussed with her, that I have feelings for women and men, the same. It doesn't make a difference to me. And of course, I didn't know what that meant at the time. But I just remember her looking at me and saying, "No, you don't. Continue." And so then I just continued down the list of all the sins that I had ever committed.
Mm.
And I just pretended like that part of me didn't exist for a long time. And then when my brother came out, I watched him struggle. And it was just a hard struggle, feeling less loved, by my community, by my family.
Mm.
And so I remember leaving was such a hard, even thought to think of, right? This church is so big, and it's an international church. So if you move, expected to go to a place that has another church. So I did that, but I did that very intentionally, going to a very, very small church. And it made it a lot easier to leave, because those people didn't know me. But when I left, it was very quickly spread throughout all of the churches, not just the small one that I was in. So my home church back here in Dallas, they knew within days of me leaving that I had left.
Mm.
And so I lost my family that I grew up with since I was 1 year old. I think I had exactly 2 friends from that church, remaining when I left. And so there was just a lot of loneliness, and a lot of lows during that time period.
Yeah. Yeah. that seems to be one of the challenges of coming out of an environment like that, is because of that sense of kind of control and like, we will be your everything. You're almost, well, like you mentioned, you're not encouraged to have relationships outside of it. That's kind of frowned upon, and like, oh, you're straying from the flock. And so what happens is that does become your everything, which makes it so hard to leave. And that was something that stood out to me just as we had our first conversation. I was thinking, oh my gosh, like the courage it took for you to take that step, to, I mean, in many ways, to kind of say like, look, this is who I'm going to be, and I've got to create, I mean, almost a whole new life. Is that kind of what it feels like? Like just a,
Absolutely. Because then
yeah,
I had no identity, right? I had no friends. I had no identity. And I was just like, well, what do I do now?
yeah. So you take the step, you kind of make the break, and you start forging this, new life. Just for a little context, like how long ago was that? And then can you share a little bit just since then, what's that experience been like for you? What have you learned? Um,
So it's been about 7 years since I left. I left at 22. So for context, that's way more many years of my life than I've been out.
yeah.
And there's just a sense of guilt that comes with it. And in that church, it's very commonly said that this is the only way. So it didn't matter what other church I went to, because I felt like I was just a fraud. If I didn't go to that church,
Mm,
I wasn't going to go to heaven. And that feeling lasted until this past year when I found the table. And I've tried so many different churches. I've tried pretending like God doesn't exist. I've tried, a bunch of different things to fix this guilt in my heart. And I really feel like it took finding the right church, finding the right community that believes the way that I believe, to get me out of that guilt-ridden past.
mm, yeah. What do you think it's been about the past year, or coming to the table, or just what God's done in your heart and mind in the season? What was it? I mean, because obviously we haven't even necessarily been meeting in person, so it's not
Right.
like, oh, it's the hugs of all the people every Sunday. What do you think that? Yeah, how has God used it? And I don't want to frame this in a way that's like, tell me all the awesome things about the table. That's not what I mean. I just mean, what is it God's used,
Right.
to
Yeah,
do
I
kind of
think
beyond
that's
for you.
so true. We haven't even, met. I've only met you in person, right? And that was very recently. So I think, for me, when I left 7 years ago, I had the same prayer in my heart for 7 years. And like I said, there was times when I didn't believe, but I continued praying that prayer. And it was that God would change my heart of stone into a heart of flesh.
Mm,
And there's a scripture that resonates with that, but at the time I didn't know that. So at
wow.
the beginning of this year, I read that scripture, and I was just gushing with tears. And it's just so crazy that 2020 was such a negative year for so many. And I feel like it was probably one of the most positive years of my life, because I was just searching. And I prayed that God would help me find what I was searching for. And I feel like it had nothing to do with me, but everything to do with God pointing me in this direction of the table. And just the community I see online, and people are just messaging, and shouting out other people, and the worship, and just your realness every Sunday is just exactly what I'm looking for. And it's been awesome so far.
Beautiful. As you kind of look ahead to 2021, I mean, what are you kind of hopeful for? What are you, yeah, kind of looking forward to? What's kind of your posture as you're like looking ahead?
I'm really excited. I'm really excited for 2021. I think that now finding this community, I feel like even more excited to just know more people, learn about more people, and hear their stories. Hopefully we'll get to meet in person at some point this year. I'm praying for that. And just, continuing to grow. I definitely don't have all the answers by any means, but continue to learn and to continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, Mariah, thank you so much for sharing. And we're just better for having you as part of us.
Thank
Your
you.
presence means so, so much. And thank you for having the courage to like open up and share about, probably even memories and things from a life, or part of your life that you'd rather just kind of like leaving it behind. So thank you for opening up in that way. We're really, really grateful.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Y'all give her like a virtual hand or something. I don't know if we can, maybe it's in the comment section. Maybe that's how we do this. So anyway, thank you so much, Mariah.
Thank you guys.
Uh, she's amazing. So last but not least tonight, I wanted to have my good friend, Glenda Bayron come up and share, come on and share. So her and her husband, hey Glenda. So,
Hi.
her and her husband Ryan, they're good friends of mine. They've been hugely instrumental in helping us launch really kind of both of the churches that we've started. And she's I would describe Glenda's a very strong person, but she's very gentle at heart when you get to like see that side of her. And so hopefully some of that will come out tonight. I think it will. And so welcome, Glenda.
Thanks.
So can you just start by just tell us a bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, Brian, whatever you want to share.
I guess I'm from here-ish. I am a child of a single mother, and I'm one of 4 girls of a single mother. And it was a very blended family. Only 2 of us share the same dad, and so we kind of moved wherever she could find work. She was a nurse. And so, but I settled roots, or I put roots down in the Metroplex, and we currently live in Rowlett. I have a husband, Ryan, and a son named Brix, and I teach. I'm a high school teacher. So, and just a little preface, I feel like I should let you know this just so you can kind of know I am an Enneagram 8. So all of this vulnerability is a lot.
Yes. Yeah. You're being courageous, my friend. And I'm really grateful. So this, I was thinking like in many ways, your story kind of contrasts with Mariah's, because for her, this year has been kind of one of like breakthrough and like, yes. And for you, this is, well, in a way it's been that more towards maybe the end of the year, but this has been a heck of a year, just profoundly, profoundly challenging. So, and really it kind of extends back, even into, I think 2019. So maybe, take us back a bit to when things kind of kicked off in terms of just starting to take a really difficult, challenging turn. You might even say kind of when things started to unravel a bit. What brought it about? What did that kind of look like?
So I am a child of trauma, and I have carried that with me for a very long time. And I had some issues with counseling as a child, so I kind of wrote that off and decided it's not for me. But I really needed to be in therapy. And so as I was going through my adult life, it was just kind of like, okay, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just survive, basically. And that all came to a head. And there was really just this one culminating event where I ultimately almost lost everything. And it was at the end of 2019. And it was my own actions that caused it. And so I had made some choices, and I had reverted back to what I had learned as a child on how to, resolve conflict. And so I'll just be 100% honest. I was abusive. And so I had some people step in, and my walls immediately went up, and I pretty much shut everyone out. And I went into the protection mode. Like, I am a self-presate. So I was like, I'm surviving this. I will come out on top. And really, like, my marriage was almost over. And I had to like kind of face the music with that. I had shut some friends out that one of them that I have been friends with since I was 13 and I'm 35. I don't actually know how old I am. And so we've been friends longer than we haven't been friends. And then it just kind of started bleeding into everything. My cocooning just started shutting everyone out. I started seeing everyone as an attack, and I couldn't really see the friendships that were there. And so it just seemed like every time I turned around, there was just another wall, another wall, another wall.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really was this kind of experience of this kind of one moment or one experience where you like you mentioned, you kind of became this kind of abusive, and like you said, it roots back to your childhood. This is kind of how you've learned to take care of yourself, defend yourself, and so you do that. And then that kind of walling up then starts to spill over into all these other relationships. I mean, I'm sure maybe you had at least a few outside of a certain friend group or something, but I mean, I kind of, as someone from the outside looking in, it was like a lot of relationships all of a sudden, like wall. That must have been unbelievably, like, just even emotionally difficult. Like, what was that like? Just even in your own kind of experience. I mean, were you aware of what you were kind of doing, or was it or was it more like, these people are nuts, or what was how did you experience that?
I was aware of what I was doing, but I also I'm gonna make sure that I am in the right, whatever. Mm-hmm. So it was also like, okay, this is what I'm being forced to do. This is who I'm being forced to become. And it was a lot of just, and it was very lonely. Just kind of realizing, because I am actually really thankful I have a really strong group of girls. And actually they're very gracious. And at one point I had just blamed all of them for the things that had happened in our relationship rather than taking any of the ownership. Mm-hmm. And so it was just kind of like, nope, I'm done. I'm over it, just cutting my losses before I could be hurt.
Yeah. Wow. That's a huge statement. That sense of cutting your losses before you can be hurt. So there you are, kind of with, these cutting your losses and you're kind of living in the midst of a lot of broken relationships. What was was there kind of a tipping point, or was it just the cumulative effect? Like, I'm wondering kind of what led you to pursue some outside help? Like you mentioned, counseling, or that world was like, just based on some experiences you'd had previously. What was it that made you kind of pursue that, or led you to pursue that?
So it was kind of an agreement between my husband and I, in working in order to work through our marriage. He was like, you really need to try it again. And so I was like, okay, I'll try the texting counseling. But if you know me, I am very smart when I can work things. And so I realized that wasn't doing anything for me. And so then I started face-to-face counseling. And I kind of realized okay, these two people, they're not really addressing things. They're just kind of talking me through, they're coaching me through. And I have also a really good friend, Aaron Brown. Some of you know him. He talked on one of the tables panels, but he's also a psychiatrist. And so I had been talking to him, and he was like, no, you really need some trauma therapy. That's really what you needed. And at the same time, he had agreed to be my husband's, our marriage counselor. And it wasn't until I met with him that he was really like, this is all about your mom. This, everything you're responding to the world as if they were your mother, and they're not. And so that was really kind of where it all started. And then it just became the snowball rolling down the mountain.
Yeah, because you started to see how that played out in this situation, in that situation, that kind of unwinding the ball of yarn, so to speak. What was that like when you got into that kind of counseling setting? Did that pretty quickly become aware? Or you became aware of it, or did you kind of fight it? Like, I'm wondering, what was that kind of experience like? And then, did you learn to kind of gain other insights just through that process of kind of counseling and talking with Aaron in the midst of it?
Oh, I fought it a lot. And there were several times like in the session, he would be like, stop, you can't do that. And then I was also, I'm a big researcher. I have a degree in English. I teach English for a living. And so I'm big on getting information. And if you know anything, I know people are like, oh, the Enneagram. An 8 goes to a 5 when they're in stress, which means like we're data diggers to support ourselves. The unhealthy side of a 5, not the healthy side of a 5. And so I did a lot of research, and I actually came upon this Instagram account called The Holistic Psychologist, and then another one called The Truth Doctor. And they introduced me to this idea of reparenting, which I've never heard of before. And it's really looking back at your parenting and how you were parented and reevaluating that and saying, they were in the wrong here. I need to figure out how to break that down and let it go and see, like, this is what should have happened. And so just kind of seeing all of that stuff and making sure that that doesn't influence who I am today. And a process of letting it go. And so that whole idea of reparenting and figuring out, like, all of that stuff my mom did was wrong. That doesn't mean the rest of the world has to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's a powerful statement. And that's like one of those statements that's like easy to make now, but hard fought for.
Yes.
Like, you have to go to hell and back to say that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know to what degree you are comfortable sharing about specifically your mom in that kind of context. So you can share as little or as much as you want there. But I'm wondering if folks could have a little more feel for what was it you were responding to or reacting to from childhood. And again, you don't have to share details you're not comfortable with. But when you say it was difficult or traumatic or whatever. Is there anything you feel comfortable sharing to give us a little insight into that, what that kind of looked like or meant?
Yeah. My mom was, and actually still is, very verbally abusive, and she was very physically abusive towards me and my 3 sisters. And so there was a time, I often say she was done being a mom by the time she had me, and she let me know how little she valued me. And I go back to the only thing I ever wanted was to be able to cry with her and for to lay down in her lap and for her to rub my hair, kind of like you see in the movies. And that was just never an option. The first time I remember her saying she was proud of me was in front of other people at my high school graduation. And so every other time it was just kind of like, oh, yeah, you're here. And I mean, the physical abuse had led me to being in foster care when I was 8. And there was also a lot of emotional abuse and psychological abuse. And she would also had some mental illnesses that she was not dealing with herself and that she was not acknowledging. And so I was the last child at home. So I became the main focus for all of her abuse because my other sisters left. They all left at 14 and never looked back.
Yeah.
And then my mom had she had a stroke my freshman year of college, and I thought like this was going to be her second chance. Everything was going to be better. And as Ryan and I would go and pick her up for dinners and stuff like that, she slowly started reverting back to her old ways. And Ryan finally looked at me one day and he goes, you're an adult and you don't have to take this anymore. And I was like, oh, that's true.
Yeah,
it's true. And so we've actually been distant
Yeah.
since then.
Yeah. So it's almost like that was kind of a one defining moment where you started to kind of differentiate from her and like, hey, boundaries,
Right.
But the tricky part was you took those ways of relating that you had learned as a young child, and of course you bring that into all of your closest relationships, which it then starts to wreak, complete havoc. And it's like there's multiple levels of distancing, and that was some of, or maybe a better metaphor is the onion. It's like one layer was undone, but there were other ones to undo. I'm wondering, okay, so you're going to counseling, you start getting these insights. And what did that path kind of towards healing and reconciliation look like for you? Because you mentioned kind of the walls. So there were a lot of kind of not even just kind of injured, but almost borderline just broken relationships. What did that kind of path towards healing and some sort of reconciliation? And not that everything was great now, but just what does that kind of looked like?
So two of my very closest friends, we had been having ongoing conversations, and they had wanted to have kind of can we get together face to face and talk about this rather than via any kind of digital communication. And I wasn't in a place, and then they're faithful enough to reach out again after many months and say, hey, this is really still on our hearts. And can we please get together? And after that, at that time, I had done a lot of the reparenting and the self-healing that the holistic psychologist kind of talks about. And I had worked through a lot of that. And so I was ready and willing to have that conversation on top of having my counseling sessions with Aaron and Ryan. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of had a conversation, and you could tell, well, they even told me after they had the conversation, they were like, we were not expecting this kind of an outcome, because I basically explained to them everything. And there was a lot of ownership. That's the hard part. That, like, I can do all of the work in the dark, but it's coming back and taking some ownership for some stuff that really isn't fun. And so that's really what I ended up doing with all of my friends, was going back and being like, hey, I did some really awful things, and I said some really awful things, and I even had some not great intentions. So, like, even letting them know some things that, like, they weren't even aware of, and just being 100% honest, because I realized, like, that's what it needed. That's what it would take.
Yeah. Whew. I mean, even that statement you just made about even some of my intentions weren't good. Like, isn't that what we'll kind of hide behind? Like, I know I said and did all this crappy stuff, but my heart, I was in a good place. I meant it for good, so to be able to even own, like, not even all of my intentions were good. Right. Oh my gosh. That's, I was particularly close to some of the people that you're talking about. And so I know when they recounted to me that some of that conversation, my jaw was on the absolute floor. I was like, oh my gosh, like, she owned it. What? Because I just knew that is so hard. That's so hard to say, like, here, it was my fault, or like, and of course everyone has things to own and stuff, but in this situation, look, this one was mostly me, and here's what it is. And like, just to own it at that level, like, that's absolutely remarkable. And I just I've told you this, but I want to publicly name, like, just the courage it took for you to do that, and the inner strength. Oh, it's incredible, Glenda. It's incredible. And I'm so grateful that you've kind of, like, chosen that path. It's just incredibly powerful. So I'm wondering what, I'm sure people are listening to this and they're kind of resonating maybe with some of your story. And I'm wondering, for someone who's maybe had some of those traumatic experiences, they kind of suspect that it's playing out today in their relationships, but it, like, scares them to death to go down that road and, like, sort of to look in those closets, so to speak. I'm wondering, would you have any, like, advice or input for someone who kind of sees themselves in your, in your journey?
I think you just have to be 100% honest with yourself. I think you really have to, beyond talking to anybody else, looking at it and being 100% honest, like with you, with the person in the mirror, like, Michael Jackson, you got to start there because I could ignore everyone. I can ignore everyone and tout my own story and, believe in that 100%. But it really started with me being honest with myself. And it really started with me looking and saying, what is the role I played? Like, I mean, even now, that's the question that I look at is, okay, this is affecting me and it's affecting me. Like, I feel anger, I feel sad, I feel lonely, I feel left out. But why? And rather than placing that onus on someone else, looking at like, what part did I play in it? Because the minute you start going outside of yourself, you can't control that. And that's really what self-healing is about. Is I can't control what my mom did to me. I can't control what she did to my sisters. I can't control the choices my sisters are now making. I can't control the choices my husband makes. But what I can do is I can look at that and make sure that I am doing what is healthy, what is whole, what is, I don't like the word right, but what is in the good for all involved. Aaron always used this. How can we make this a win-win for everybody?
Yeah.
And so that's a really good idea is how can this be a win-win for everybody? Because I'm that self-pres. I'm like, it will be a win for me. And you like bring someone else in.
I will win. Yeah.
Right. And so making it a win-win for everybody and also seeing the heart, because all of those friends, when I was talking to them, all of them said, thank you and I love you. I tried. But I say, and some of those were through text, and I have them. And I mean, just grace upon grace is, and whenever you're honest with yourself and you're able to accept that, and yeah.
That's beautiful. What's it been like now? Like here you are. It's been a few months. This is, I mean, we're not talking about things that happened 6 months ago. It's
Right.
been what, maybe 2-ish months, 3 months?
October.
Like yeah. Yeah. So it's, a little time, but not yesterday, but not, early in the year or something. So I'm wondering has your experience or what's it like today? Like, are you in a place where it's sort of like, I'm just walking out the healing, I'm feeling a lot better? Is it just very up and down each day? Like, I'm wondering, how are you experiencing it now?
I think it's not a one and done. It's definitely not a one and done. We are using the phrases, and when my friends came over that night, my husband and I started using this phrase, rewriting the narrative. We've been friends for 7 years. I've been married for 12 years. For the past that many years have written a narrative for these people. And so with this healing and this change, I have to rewrite that narrative. And all I asked them was the chance to rewrite that narrative. Can you please give me that chance? And that they were, of course, way willing to give me that chance. But it's something that I have to constantly look at. And I have to go, okay, is this behavior the behavior I want to do? I want to have, is this behavior I want to rewrite my narrative with? And really kind of reevaluate those situations. Do I want to be fast and quick and respond immediately? Do I want to hide and hold and hoard emotions until they explode and then let them spew on everybody? Or do I just want to be 100% honest and, let them know in the beginning, hey, this is really uncomfortable for me, but this is who I am now. So here goes. And so it's a day-to-day journey. Every time I encounter something new, it's okay, let's reevaluate. So there are some ups and downs, but it's not a one and done. It's definitely, you've got to make that decision every day. And it's totally worth it. So it is hard. It's hard whenever you see all your friends have a party and you're not there. And you then have to go, oh, I'm so offended that I wasn't invited. But then you have to step back and you have to go, oh, okay, what part did I play in not getting invited?
Mm.
And so, like, looking at it that way rather than they hurt me so badly.
Yeah. It sounds it's like you've gained this kind of insight, and now I kind of what I hear you naming is it's so challenging to walk it out in this day in day out way, but it's so worth it. Because I can imagine folks kind of hearing this thinking like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a lot. But the thing is, even to avoid it or to not deal with it, that's also a lot.
Yes.
That comes with its own set of consequences and ways it plays out in your life. And so kind of what I hear you naming is like, it's worth it, even though it's hard. Is that?
Yeah. And that hiding part, you're doing it all alone. Whenever you're actually walking it out, you have your people. So I can be like, hey, this is really hard. And they're like, I know it's really hard. How can we, come alongside you? How can we, support you in this and things like that? But when you're holding it all and you're holding it in and dealing with it and putting up those walls, you're alone.
Yeah. Linda, you're amazing.
Thanks.
You're amazing. And it's been, I know, a heck of a year for you, but I am believing for really good things for you in 2021. And I'm so grateful for how you've, walked this out. And I'm also just grateful for your friendship, the courage you've shown, and in that ability or that decision to take personal ownership. Y'all, our world would be so much better if we could all live into that. It's like the hardest thing in the world. But I'm so grateful for your example of just learning to walk that out. That's a powerful challenge. I know it is to me. And I know for everyone listening. So thank you so much for just making those decisions this past year, and just for your willingness to, be with us tonight and to share. So thank you so much, my friend.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Y'all, I want to go ahead and pray for us. Those are powerful, huh? I'm so grateful for these two ladies. They're amazing. So let's pray and just ask God to kind of seal everything we've heard in our hearts. So Lord, I just thank you for the vulnerability, the honesty, and openness of both Mariah and Glenda. And there's so many insights and lessons for us in their stories. And so God, I ask for the courage to embrace what you're speaking and saying. I believe, God, that you're speaking to some people right now and calling them to maybe some scary places, but to some good places. So I pray courage over them. I pray a sense of boldness, desire, God, to find healing and hope. God, and I pray that this 2021 would be a year of connection, of hope, of love, of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of personal ownership. God, a year where we just take huge strides in becoming more like you. God, so do that work in our hearts and minds. We love you. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.